Hello and welcome to another episode. So, if you've been following this series of this engine build, then you would know that we got the heads and the cylinders and everything together. So the next step is to get the tinware done. I was contemplating not painting the original tinware because I thought it might match the patina of the car and overall look. But there's two reasons why I decided to paint it. One is that some of these panels were actually a little too rusty to look patina. It just looked pretty shit actually. And the second reason is because I'm doing away with the heaters and going to use these J-tubes instead. There's a few modifications I need to make to certain parts of the tinware, such as this panel. We don't need these holes anymore because these are the pipes that come off of the heater boxes to then go into the fan shroud. So the fan shroud is the next thing that needs to be modified, and these have pipes that go to the heater boxes on the exhaust. So I'm going to cut these away and fill the holes and then smooth them over. So that's really the main reason why I decided, and I think it will look quite nice. I like the fact that the car is going to have this nice patina, but then when you open the engine lid, everything is nice, clean and restored. The other thing that needs attention is this is an original Volkswagen exhaust, so I blasted it and it's in pretty good shape actually, apart from two corners here that need a little bit of attention, but nothing too major. The original chrome inserts, the pea shooter, they've rusted in there, so I need to get them out. I actually chopped them off, but I need to somehow get them out. And because I'm going to be running without heaters, we don't need these, so I don't need to chop them off, but I want to chop them off, so I'm going to cut these and do away with them. Oh, there's one other thing I need to address as well, is on the bottom of the fan shroud, you have these flaps that open and close with the thermostat. So they are closed when the engine is cold, and it stops the air circulating so much until the engine gets to a certain temperature. Then the thermostat opens on a rod and it opens these flaps, and then you get full airflow for greater cooling. So I'm going to put these back on, but I'm going to somehow make them stay in the open position and not attach the thermostat. So the first thing I'm going to start with, I think, is this panel, because it needs the most work. Okay, so pretty simply, I have some, this is 0.7 millimeter thick mild steel, pretty much the same as the original shrouding. So I just put this on here, like so, and then I use the clamp and then I scribed around the hole, and then I'll just cut that out and it'll be exactly the right size. Okay, so I just roughly cut around this with the guillotine, so I don't know if you can see, there's like some sharp edges that need to be, or it just needs to be smoothed off and rounded off, and for that I'll use the air sanding. Like so. Let's see if it fits. Oh, look at that. Perfect. So let's take a closer look. So I've used these two magnets to hold it in place, and this is the top of the panel that's going to be on display. So I've made the top flush because there might be some difference in the thickness of metal. So this will make a nicer finish on the side that will be on display. I've left a gap, a small gap between the panel and the new piece that I'm welding in. And this is because I'm going to use a MIG welder. So a MIG welder actually feeds wire constantly as you weld. I could use TIG welding, and this creates more heat, etc., and you need to planish it a bit more. And the reason I've chosen the MIG welder is for that reason. So I will dot around like this when I weld, not like a constant weld all the way around, and this will create less heat and less distortion. Okay, so when you can feel it's a little bit high or low, I'm just going to use a bit of pressure. Make another tack. Okay, so now I'm going to hammer it a little bit because it's not quite flat everywhere. Okay, that's better. Let's make some more tacks. Okay, I blew a little hole there. It's a little bit thin on the side, but no biggie. Okay, that feels really good. So now I'm going to sand these down, just make sure it's completely nice and flat before I then finish up welding. Okay, so you can see there it's nice and smooth, like both surfaces, or like the original panel and the new piece are nice and smooth. So now when I weld this and then grind it off, it should be nice and flat and flush. Maybe a little bit high there. Okay, so there it is welded up. I basically went like this, just made tacks. So it evenly distributes the heat and you don't get a lot of heat build up in one space. I'm just going to clean that up with a wire brush and then I'm going to shine a torch through from the other side to see if there's any pinholes. Okay, I can just see one there, so there's a little spot that I missed, but everywhere else actually looks sealed up, so that's good news. Okay, so now with that welded up, I can grind off the weld so it's nice and flush, and hopefully it's still nice and flat. We shall see. There's a little bit of, you can see there's a little bit of distortion there, but I might need to give it a little hammer to, because what happens is where you weld, it expands and then it contracts further from the starting point of the metal, so it actually shrinks it. So that's why you get a bit of this distortion, and to combat that you have to use a hammer and a dolly. There's a dolly from beneath and you basically stretch it back out to get rid of this like tin canning, they call it, where it's a bit wibbly wobbly. Okay, so there you have it. The first hole is filled. You'll notice that when I ground it off, I didn't stay in one spot for too long and I moved constantly. And this is to not heat up one area too much. As I mentioned before, like when you're welding, it will create distortion. So it's important that you move around. Also, you need to move in different, grind the welds in different directions to get it flat. But I just gave it a little hammering with the hammer and dolly, and I've got rid of that wibbly wobbliness. Didn't have to hit it very hard or much at all. And then always important is to check on the other side to see if you've got good penetration through the thickness of the steel. I'm going to leave that. It adds a little bit of strength there. It's underneath the car, you're not going to see it, so that's fine. I'll give this a little bit of a sand off, and hopefully it will look like it's not been repaired. I'm using an orbital sander, and this is a 60 grit. So there we have it, first repair done. You can just about see the weld where I've made it, but it's nice and flat, and that won't show up once it's painted. So, job done. Just another 2 to go. As if by magic, it's no longer holy, and with good penetration all round. Okay, so this is a fan shroud, and quite simply, this would blow air through these pipes, and then these tubes would come off of here, these flexi pipes, join onto the holes that we just filled into that other piece of tinware, and then it goes into the heater exchangers and blows hot air into the cabin. So we're going to do away with all the heating system, so I want to cut these off and make it flush. Okay, so that's the first one removed. Quite easy. So the next thing I need to do is remove where these are spot welded on here and this little tab here, and then I'm going to just grind it flush. Okay, that was pretty simple. Because there was only one spot weld holding those tabs on, I could just twist them off and they snap off. Okay, I don't know if you can see, but this edge is really straight, and there's actually a little bit of a nice gentle curve around there. So I'm just going to bend that edge over a little bit to match the rest of it. Okay, so that looks a bit better. It's not absolutely perfect, but it's pretty good. So we need to make a template for this, and there's several ways of doing it. You can use like a piece of paper with magnets, and then you mark around the edge and then cut it out. But for this I'm going to use, this is like, I think it's decorator's tape. So we basically just make a piece and stick it over there. And you can see, you can just mark it with your finger. Be very careful though, because it can be sharp and you cut your finger open. So you can mark it like that, and you can quite clearly see the shape that you need to make. You can also like hammer the edge like this, and it will actually cut into the tape for you. But we're just going to mark it. And as long as it's pretty close to what you need, we can always trim it afterwards. But you get the idea. So we're using the same thickness steel as we did for the other repair we did. So this is 0.7 and it's about the same as what this is. I think the Volkswagen might be slightly thicker, but there's different ways of doing this as well. I could cut this out, but I think for this I'm going to choose a straight edge because that is pretty straight, and mark that on the edge there. So I use the straight edge we already have, so then I only have to cut 3 sides, and then I'm going to use a punch and go around my template like that. So then when I peel this off, you can quite clearly see where we need to cut. Ta-da! As long as it's pretty much dead on. So next I'm going to use the guillotine to cut this out. Okay, so this is the guillotine we have at work. It's quite simple. You put your work in there, you look down and you can see where the blade cuts, and then you just push down with your foot and it cuts a nice straight edge. The advantage of using a guillotine over tin snips is it keeps the material dead flat and it gives a really nice clean edge when it cuts. If you use tin snips, it will actually deform the side of the metal and it can stretch it a little bit, and then you always have to hammer it over. So I always try and cut as many cuts as I can. It's the same as when I cut those circles. I just did lots of small cuts and then trim the edges off, and the panel stays really nice and flat, so you don't have to do any hammering, and then there's no chance of you distorting the work before you've even welded it in. Okay, so you can see this is the bit that I just cut with the guillotine, and we're almost there, and you can see I'm just outside of the line a little bit, so we have a little bit of trim room. So I'll just give that a trim with the old grinding disc, and let's see where we are. Okay, so there we have it. There's a little bit of a gap around the edges because I'm using MIG weld, which is constantly feeding wire. That wire obviously has to go somewhere. If there is no gap, it will sit on top, and you'll have less. It will less likely penetrate all the way through the metal, and the weld won't be as strong. So always leave a little bit of a gap when you're doing MIG welding. It's a different story with TIG or gas welding. Then you want a really nice tight fit, because you basically just fuse the metal together then, and you can add wire, but it's not constantly being fed like you are with MIG. So the GoPro just run out, but there is the finished side. I still need to do that side, but it's not 100% perfect, but it's very much good enough, because once it's on the engine, everything's in front of it, etc. You're not going to notice that. I don't think this lump here is from my welding. It goes up a little bit there, but I think it's because of the fixing point for the coil. But this is actually very nice and flat and smooth. So okay, it's the weekend. So last night after work, I threw on some paint on some of the stuff. Didn't get it all done. I just bought some satin black rattle can. As you can see, the repairs are not 100%, but they're pretty good for this. You know, I don't want to go too crazy. This isn't going to be some concours car or anything. It's just going to be a usable car. So I'm quite happy that they've come quite well. This one is still in primer. On the other piece of tinware, I noticed that one of the bolts has actually snapped off, so I'm going to have to get that out. So the method I'm going to use is quite a common one that people use. Is you get a nut, you put it over the top like that, you weld down onto the broken stud, and then you just take it out with the spanner. So let's give that a go. Okay, so again I'm going to be using the MIG welder. I've turned it up to quite high setting. We're just going to place that on there and just weld directly down on top. Like that, smoking a little bit because there's probably some oil or paint in there. We'll just let that cool a little bit. The thing is, if you try to undo this when it's still red hot, the metal is so soft that it might just twist and snap off, and it doesn't always penetrate to the broken screw. So I can feel that that's moving. So if we turn it over, yeah, it's actually come loose, so that's a good sign. Let's see if it'll unwind. It's always a good idea to go backwards and forwards as well, because the threads might be full of dirt and crud. There you go, it's loosened up a bit now. Hopefully it'll come out. Boom, like that. Simple. Let's get it painted. Most of the parts are now painted. I just put them on the shelf, let them dry off. I'll leave them overnight, and if I have time, maybe come in tomorrow and fit them to the engine. So that's it for another episode. Hope you enjoyed it. I think you'll agree it's really coming together. It's really looking good. A few more bits to finish up before I can start it. I need to do a rebuild on the fuel pump because it seems to be stuck, and a couple of other bits to paint, the exhaust to repair and paint. I bought some heat resistant paint, so we'll throw all that on there and we will start it soon.